Hello, and also welcome from my side. I thought that Simon was going to say the last Greens EFA press briefing before the vote tomorrow, because this is obviously what everything is heading towards. I guess you can already sense the nervosity in this House around the vote on the nature restoration law tomorrow. We can see that the vote is going to be very tight. I can already spill the beans and say that we don't have a full calculation yet how this is going to go tomorrow, so it's going to really be on the spot. And obviously we are working towards making it possible to vote for this, and it's not only crucial, and you've heard the arguments many times, for the preservation of nature, which is important not only to better protect biodiversity, but also to adapt to changing weather conditions, to changing climate conditions. It's also crucial to meet the climate goals. Just before in the plenary debate, we had the question put to one of the EPP MEPs how they are foreseeing to basically meet the 10% nature-based climate action that is foreseen in the climate law. If they are not voting in favor of this law, he unfortunately didn't have an answer for this, so obviously there is no plan how we are going to go about with this, and that clearly shows that tomorrow with this vote we are also voting on the Green Deal, and the Green Deal is very clearly under attack from the EPP, the biggest group in this House, and the group of the Commission President. So the stakes are very high on Wednesday. Also, you know that especially in the EPP group, from what we hear, a lot of pressure is being put on MEPs to vote with the group line, and this obviously gives us a lot of concern also for future majority building in this House. We have a tradition, and we know that this is different from how things are done in some national parliaments, but we have a tradition on working constructively with the pro-European democratic groups. We still have 9 months, more or less, in this legislature, and we as Green Group obviously would like to keep it that way, but for that the vote tomorrow will be very decisive, because we will see whether Manfred Weber's strategy of a destructive line, of trying to end laws, of trying to block laws, is going to win, or the constructive line of the 4 constructive groups that are coordinating together so that we can win a majority tomorrow. I'm not going to speak further. I'd have a lot to say, but I'm going to leave the rest to Philippe. Thank you.
Like Terry, I'm struck by the amount of fact denial that abounds in this debate. I had an exchange with Niels Torvalds, Renew Finland, earlier, and you know the entire strategy of Finland to abate climate change, so their national climate strategy, is predicated on Finland's forests absorbing 20 million tons of carbon every year. And the fact is that Finland's forests are emitting carbon. And then he said, yeah, but there's a new study that shows that it is not as bad. Yeah, okay, they are emitting a bit less carbon than we thought, but they are still emitting, not absorbing. Same thing with agriculture. And so when Manfred Weber tells me, well, listen, Philippe, you know, it was already hard enough for EPP to accept that we need to do something on climate. Don't come with biodiversity and all the rest of it, because we have enough of a burden. I'm telling him, Manfred, even for climate, we need this law. If you don't care about bees, yeah, well, by the way, we need them to pollinate. So even if you think just economically we need them, well, you have to do something about that, and there's denial. So that tells me that this is not about substance. It is not about substance, it's about political strategy. And my understanding is that, well, basically it started, remember Manfred Weber's speech, State of the Union, a year ago? You were there? You could think that this was the leader of the opposition speaking. Already then, he launched the offensive. He said, okay, we need a moratorium on new environmental legislation. We've had it with the European Green Deal. Well, my words, not his. So basically, he entered campaign mode a year ago. And so you would expect that from, say, fringe political groups, but not from EPP, who claims to be, you know, the pillar of the European integration, the pillar of serious politics, of economically sound politics, and actually it is just about power. That's what it is. That's what it is. And frankly speaking, how should I say, I would hope that we have more adults in the room. And we have a number. I'm happy because this parliament is certainly not the worst in Europe. But when you see the attempt at debasing the way this parliament works coming from any other group, well, from EPP, the biggest group, this is really scary. I hope that reason will prevail. And again, this text is not perfect. No, well, I know no Commission text that is perfect. But that's the nature of the work of the co-legislators. If the text has been a bit rushed, is a bit unclear in terms of definitions, maybe is overreaching in some areas, fine. Let's discuss, let's debate, let's make it better. That's what we are paid for. That was what Council is paid for. Let's make this text better. And certainly, I hope that we are going to have a text tomorrow. It won't be perfect. I don't think it's going to be perfect, but it's going to be a good base to work from now on. But then again, it's not that we need nature. We are part of nature. There's no life without nature, certainly no human life. This is about us.
Thanks, Philippe. We'll go then to questions. You can also ask questions online if you raise your hand. I'll take them in the room. Yes, Andy.
Yeah, Andy Bounds from the Financial Times. Philippe, I think you put your finger on something there. I mean, all these pledges have been made internationally, and yet nowhere, let alone the EU, seems to be on course to hit all these targets. So where do we go from here, and why is this law so important as part of this? Isn't it just another failed promise? Thanks.
Well, I would say that indeed there's a lot of promises being made, and we have always claimed that Europe is, the world champion of all this. I would say if we are not, we should, because we have a historical responsibility. And again, I'm looking at how the Global South has reacted. For instance, on the war in Ukraine, I think that by and large, and you might say there's disingenuity with the leaders, but in the population, there's basically a sentiment of having had it with the West and certainly Europe having double standards, making big promises, the climate funding, 100 billion a year, money still has to come, condemning the invasion in Ukraine, but invading Iraq 20 years earlier. We need to reclaim credibility. So on one hand, we have global responsibility. We should do our fair share, and our fair share is big. And second, this is really what makes me mad when I think of right-wingers. They claim to work for the economy, but actually, by not conquering positions of leadership in the transition, we are basically forfeiting what should be the basis of Europe's economy moving forward. We don't have many resources. I love to claim this slogan. I was 10 years old, the oil crisis 1973. And the slogan in France was, en France, on n'a pas de pétrole, mais on a des idées. And that summarizes basically the plight of Europe. We have few resources, but we have brains to find solutions. And if we don't do it, then others will do it. When I hear the far right and the right complaining that, the leaders of the electric car industry are American and Chinese, we gave them the business, right? By not being leaders, we surrendered leadership. I don't want this to continue. I want us really to lead into the transition. So if you don't do it for climate, if you don't do it because of historical responsibility, do it because it makes good business sense. And this is still not, well, it is trickling outside of the Green family. I'm happy. I think von der Leyen gets it, but I think that Weber doesn't get it. He still does not. He still does not. And again, we have to embrace this century, and this century is hard. Vondra, the ECR guy, complained that it was too much too fast. Why is it too much too fast? Guys, the scientific evidence has been there since 1972, the Club of Rome report. And we have waited maybe 47 years to start doing something. No surprise that it is a lot in a small amount of time. That was the result of our past choices. And yes, it is difficult. I'm not saying it's easy. But there's a difference between saying something is difficult and saying we can't do it. We believe it's difficult, but we can do it. If any continent has the resources, it's Europe. Come on.
Can I just add one point? Because, you know, we had a lot of climate activists here this morning, amongst others. Greta was here. And I think what they really clearly said was that why should we believe in politics and, you know, political decision-making if you come up with agreements, if you come up with laws that you want to keep, and then when you are actually discussing about the measures that can make them possible, you are not delivering. And this is what is happening right now. In German, we would really say this is Politikversagen, because we would, you know, we signed the Paris Agreement, we went on voting on a climate emergency in this parliament, we voted on a climate law, we gave these targets to ourselves. It's not someone else who said Europe should do this. It was us who took these decisions. And now, half a year ago, we supported the Kunming-Montreal Biodiversity Framework. And half a year later, we vote on a crucial law to live up to the expectations. And it's, as Philippe says, it's not even going above and beyond. It is really just the minimum of what we can do. And half a year later, one of the richest parts of the world says, we are not living up to the things that we promised half a year ago. I mean, who else do you expect to move then? Who else is going to act? So this is really a crunch moment, not only for the Green Deal, but also whether Europe stands by its word. For its own citizens, but also for the global community, for the global South. Are we actually the ones that are doing what we are talking about, or are we the ones that are talking and telling others what to do, but not doing it ourselves? And this is what we are voting on tomorrow.
Thanks, Terry. Any more questions in the room or online? Yes, and just name your media, please. Thank you.
Wester van Gaal, EU Observer. I have a question about Esther de Lange, who is arguing that against this law because it legalizes nature, right? It basically she's referring to the Dutch situation where Natura 2000 areas are blocking construction. Have you talked to her about this, and what do you think of the argument?
Maybe I start. I mean, we have started from a very different position. If you look at what Greens put as amendments when this process started, and when you look at where we are right now, you would probably ask me, why are you still planning to vote for this, even if these amendments are going to pass? So a lot of the concerns that EPP have had from the start of the shadow meetings, I wasn't there, I'm not the shadow, but they have been taken on board. But still, this was never about substance. This was never about whether EPP is going to get some of the compromises that they want. It's exactly like Philippe said. It was a political choice then to say, we are going to leave these negotiations and we are going to vote against the law altogether, no matter what kind of compromise the other side makes. Because what we see now in the Council approach that is going to be the basis for the discussion then tomorrow in the vote, it's already much flexibilized to what the Commission has proposed. And some of the amendments that are on the table are going to flexibilize it even more. And even in the law, you also know, it is not the Commission that is going to take the decisions on how member states should implement that, but it's going to be national implementation plans that are going to do that. So yes, if you want this to be more flexible, table amendments into that direction, but don't leave the negotiations altogether, because this, and I mean, it's true, EPP is the biggest group, it's a center group of this parliament, but this is an approach that is usually taken by the far right here in this house. We don't want any European legislation, we don't want Brussels to decide anything, and this would be a very, very dangerous shift if now EPP is also going to go down that road. So for me, vote against the rejection amendment, then vote in favor of the amendments that are going to flexibilize it more, and vote then to a very less ambitious result of it, and then we go into trilogues. This is the strategy that I propose to all the constructive people in EPP and Renew, and this is the way how we usually take decisions here in this house.
If I may add, I know Esther quite well. Esther is coming from the Netherlands. If there's one country that is bursting at the seams, it's the Netherlands. Tiny speck of land, millions of porks, millions of cars, millions of hectares covered by concrete. Where will it end? And my message is that fundamentally, when I hear arguments like hers, I find we need to do something, but we will not accept any hard limits. And there, I want to say that a kid, a small kid, wants to have it all. That's natural for a kid. And becoming adult, in my view, is a process of accepting limits, limits to your own life, limits to what you can and cannot do, and learning to be happy to live within those limits, because actually those limits are inherently the rules of life. And to me, adult policymaking today forces us to recognize that indeed there are limits to what we can do. And we can live happily within those limits. It's not like it's a prison. It's just recognizing that, well, our lives end. That indeed, when Terry grew, and she grew up quite a lot, but it stopped at some day. She didn't grow to become 3 meters tall. And I think she's happy with that. Because indeed, it can be good when basically you have reached the space, you can occupy the space that you can occupy, and actually there's enough also immaterial space that you can occupy in your life to live happily. But again, you cannot, what will happen when 100% of the territory of the Flanders or the Netherlands, I'm saying that because they are densely populated areas, will be covered by concrete? What do we do next? So we cover the sea with concrete, and when we have done that, what then? Come on. At some point in time, we have to accept that indeed, well, we need to put limits. And when people say, yeah, but that means that you will cull porks, yes, well, actually, we are doing that every day in the millions. Well, maybe not in the millions every day, but maybe indeed some areas of economic development have gone too far because they are not sustainable to sustain human life on this planet. And there's nothing wrong in recognizing that. You know, errare humanum est, perseverare diabolicum.
Thanks, Philippe. Any last questions? Yes, I have one here.
Oui, bonjour. Pas besoin de prendre ça. Emmanuel Beretta, Le Point. Ma question pour Philippe. Vous avez dit que Manfred Weber poursuivait une stratégie politique en prétextant prendre en otage ce texte. Est-ce que vous pouvez développer quelle stratégie politique vous le voyez développer? Qui vise-t-il à travers ce texte?
Je crois qu'il ne faut pas avoir fait Bac plus 19 en sciences politiques pour comprendre le jeu de Manfred Weber. Je pense que Manfred Weber a dû accepter en 2019 qu'il ne serait pas président de la Commission. Et je pense qu'il a vu une autre PPE prendre le leadership de la Commission et arriver 4 ans après à être, je crois, en tout cas, la plus grande présidente de la Commission depuis Jacques Delors au moins. Donc je pense qu'il a bien compris qu'il y a une dynamique qui s'est lancée là qu'il ne pourra pas arrêter. Mais je pense que l'offensive que mène Manfred Weber aujourd'hui vise à mettre sous tutelle un éventuel second mandat de Ursula von der Leyen. Ça, c'est ma lecture. Maintenant, j'avoue que je ne sais pas tout de tout, et certainement pas des conciliabules internes au PPE, mais je pense que fondamentalement, c'est ça. C'est mettre sous tutelle Ursula von der Leyen si, comme je m'y attends, elle se lance pour un second mandat. C'est lui dire, OK, tu auras un second mandat, mais tu vas faire les politiques du PPE. Réécoutez son discours du State of the Union l'an dernier. C'est limpide. Il a mis ses cartes sur la table à ce moment-là. Et il déroule la stratégie depuis.
Up here on the left, was there a question? Yeah.
Bonjour, une question sur un sujet totalement différent. Jeudi, le Parlement va se prononcer sur l'acte de soutien à la production de munitions. Quelle est votre position et comment vous qualifiez ce moment vers toujours un peu plus d'Europe de la défense?
Bon, première chose, je pense que la guerre en Ukraine a bien montré que les dividendes de la paix étaient allés un peu loin. Moi, je suis un pacifiste dans le sens où je veux qu'on règle les différends entre les humains par la négociation et dans le cadre d'institutions démocratiques, mais il faut reconnaître que ça n'est pas exactement le monde dans lequel on vit, et Vladimir Poutine nous l'a rappelé. Donc, on n'en est pas au point où on peut désarmer à ce point-là. Donc, le fait qu'en Europe, on s'arme suffisamment, en tout cas, que pour dissuader une attaque et pour aider, entre-temps, l'attaque qui a eu lieu, enfin, la résistance à l'attaque qui a eu lieu, ça me semble sain. Le problème et le fait de faire ça ensemble, entre Européens, je crois que c'est une bonne chose. Enfin, je crois qu'il y a moyen de faire des économies d'échelle en travaillant ensemble. Par contre, ce qui ne va pas, et c'est le débat, je fais la connexion avec la proposition de révision du cadre financier pluriannuel à mi-mandat qui a été lancé par la Commission, on ne peut pas sans arrêt empiler de nouvelles missions sur dans le panier des institutions européennes sans leur donner les moyens qui vont avec. Parce qu'on ne peut pas dire, oui, mais enfin, faites plus avec moins. Hein. Ça ne va pas. Et ça, c'est le problème qu'on a, c'est qu'on a exploité les flexibilités du budget à outrance. Maintenant, il va falloir soit que les États membres remettent des moyens dans le panier de l'Union européenne, soit qu'ils permettent à l'Union européenne d'avoir ses propres moyens, c'est ce qu'on appelle les ressources propres. Mais en tout cas, cette évolution qui consiste à mutualiser une partie, en tout cas, des dépenses de défense au niveau européen, pourquoi pas, mais en tout cas, les financements doivent suivre. Et le contrôle démocratique, bien sûr, aussi. Ce sont les deux gros critères que nous avons en matière d'européanisation de la défense. Et donc, là, le compte n'y est pas pour le moment. Alors, sur le texte lui-même, on va le soutenir, mais ça n'est un truc que d'un montant relativement limité. Mais si on veut amplifier dans ce domaine-là, il faudra que l'argent soit apporté par les États membres ou que les ressources propres soient à la hauteur et que tout cela se passe sous un contrôle démocratique très étroit. Les fonctions régaliennes sont par excellence les fonctions qui doivent faire l'objet d'un contrôle démocratique. Et là-dessus, plutôt que monarchiste français, je suis plutôt républicain allemand en la matière.
Okay, we'll take one last question.
Je reviens, Consoli Aska News Italie. Je reviens à la question sur la nature, sur la restauration de la nature. Je suis arrivé en retard, j'espère que la question n'a pas été posée. Et là, le compromis qui a été proposé par Renew, de revenir en fait, d'atterrir en fait sur le texte du Conseil. Est-ce que les Verts l'acceptent? Parce que le texte du Conseil est très watered down, on dit en anglais, par rapport au texte de la Commission. Il y a beaucoup d'obligations qui n'ont pas été retenues et pour les objectifs. Donc, est-ce que les Verts sont prêts à accepter ça comme texte de compromis, en fait, carrément moins ambitieux, mais qui au moins sauve la loi sur la nature, alors que autrement, on va rester à l'arrêt pendant 3-4 ans au moins? Merci.
It's okay, I'll take in this woman here. You had a comment, question as well?
Thanks a lot. Yeah, I arrived late also, so sorry if the question was already asked, but it was about the same thing. Do the Greens have a red line and at one point would say, okay, we're not going to vote for a report without this level of ambition? Like, what's your red line? Thank you.
No, I mean, it's not a unified strategy between the constructive groups, as you can see, because you rightfully said Renew is now tabling the council approach. We have already tabled amendments, so the voting is going to go, we first vote on the rejection amendment, and then we are going to have one big amendment, sort of, that is the council approach, and then we have the other amendments by groups or by individual MEPs. And yes, you're absolutely right, as Greens, and if you look at how we went into this debate, it's really far from where we started. But at the same time, we are Democrats and we are trying to find compromise, so if this is going to be the majority line of this House, we are still going to vote in favor, because we don't have a unified strategy with the other constructive groups, but we have a coordinated strategy, and I think what unites us, I mean, the three groups, the left, the SD and the Greens unanimously, but Renew also in a very, very large majority, is that we want to get this text approved. Because if this text is going to be voted down tomorrow, we are not going to have a law by the end of this mandate. And I mean, I don't have to tell you that we don't have more time to lose. We need to start acting now, and this is why we are going to vote in favor of this text, even though, as you have rightfully pointed out, it is watered down, it's far away from what the Parliament originally wanted. But we hope that with the rapporteur still tabling some of the ENVI compromises that have been adopted in ENVI, it's going to be, at least in parts, stronger than the text of the Council, and then in the trilogues that we can fight exactly for this to go through. So we'll see the vote tomorrow, but now, but at the moment, when we look at what Renew has tabled in terms of the Council approach, we don't have red lines that we wouldn't vote for the text in the end.
Okay, thank you all. Tomorrow the vote is in the 12 o'clock block, so we will have a press point with the co-presidents immediately after